Good day and welcome back to the second video of the Performing at Your Best tutorial series. My goal is to provide you a library of the perspectives, strategies, and tactics for becoming more the person you would like to be through performing at your best. As I'd mentioned in the first video, these first 6 or so videos will be looking at key perspectives and principles. Understanding those principles of human performance will set the foundation for what you'll be doing in the specific applications. Again, I do not know your background, your preferences, needs, and goals. So particularly with these first 100 level videos, view those in order so that you have a sequence of it. Then when we come to the 200 level videos, then you can pick and choose which aspect, which element, which concept you want to learn more about. As you have no doubt noticed, I am old, which is a good thing because I've seen a lot of the uses, advances, and misuses of performance psychology over the last 50 plus years. I am retired now. So as I mentioned to you, I have no ulterior motives. This is not a marketing effort, these series. It's my effort just to share this information with you. What you do with it is up to you. When I retired a couple years ago, I had talked to a friend who runs a local play it again sports store. And I said, hey, all I want to do now in life is to chase a golf ball and chase my wife. He responded brilliantly. He said, you know, I've heard one of those is pretty difficult. So that's all I want to do is share this information with you. Throughout my professional career as a researcher, writer, coach, sports psychologist, my major goal was to be a translator, if you will, of looking at all the advances in little pockets, in most cases, of performance psychology, integrating them and then translating them to people from all walks of life could benefit from those. Psychology has had a sad tradition of not applying the information. There has been little emphasis of supporting how do we apply these things. They would rather just research these. Those go all the way back to 1946, right after World War II, when the federal government was providing a lot of funds for psychologists and psychiatrists to help counsel all of our poor veterans coming back from World War II. Another almost nefarious thing that happened in 1946 is that the top elite university psychology programs in the Northeast would meet regularly to see about other programs and what to advise them in staffing new professors. Their belief was they wanted to have psychology treated like biology or chemistry, a hard science. So research was key. They wanted it to be pure. As such, they only recommended other universities to hire researchers to keep this purity of psychology. Along with that, they said there should be no emphasis or support with classes or professors on applying psychology. So as such, we have been always behind the 8 ball, if you will, on how to apply this information in an integrated, practical way that people from all walks of life could benefit. As you will see later on in this 100 series, when we talk about winning, I say that the first principle of winning is to not lose, not make the critical mistakes that take you right out of it. A parallel to that is the first principle of performing better, understanding the concepts and perspectives of performing at your best is to not follow a lot of the myths, misunderstandings that performance psychology has been facing. A lot of these myths and misunderstandings were promoted not by professionally trained psychologists and counselors. No, they were promoted by the media, old-fashioned coaches or musical directors that said, I'm going to bring along my people like I was brought along. So a lot of this was not done by psychologists. So I want to share with you in this video the things to avoid. Now, you may not agree with some of these that I mentioned. I just want you to consider those things. There are 7 myths about human performance. Here's the first one. You've heard this many times, and is commentators or even athletes, for having nothing better to say, more particularly to say, they will use the nice alliteral phrase, muscle memory. There is no such thing as muscle memory. There are not little brains in each of your muscles. What happens is that people who believed in this false concept called muscle memory believed that they could just go through the motions in all their rehearsal or practice sessions with their mind being somewhere else, justifying, well, my body's knowing what to do. No, it doesn't. Even with the advances of neuroscience that you'll hear in a couple videos from now, is that that you have to be actively involved mentally in all of your practices and rehearsals. The more mentally you're engaged, the more you're connecting these synapses in your brains to reverberate and to remember those things. There is no such thing as muscle memory. Back in the 1950s, the famous Ben Hogan, the golfer, who was recovering from a near fatal car accident that almost destroyed his career, but saved his wife's life, he was on the driving range, and some spectator or journalist came up to him and said, Mr. Hogan, I see you're hitting a lot of balls. You're creating muscle memory. He stopped, threw down his cigarette, and said, no, that is wrong. I find my answers in the dirt, as he said, hitting balls with a purpose. So whenever you hear this concept of muscle memory, people don't know what they're talking about in terms of learning and retention. The second myth of human performance you've heard 100 times, and it's some rah-rah football coach saying, okay, I want you to give 110% effort. And people give flat efforts, they become injured. There is no such thing as 110% effort. Maximally, there's 100% effort. And what we found out, in order to perform well, especially with longer, more subtle, more intricate performances, the best percentages are about 87% to 90% of your maximum effort. Because a lot of times you may be trying to be perfect, to force things. And when you're trying to give 110% effort, you actually are working against yourself. I'm sure you've all encountered when things are going well in your life, you're confident and composed, that you kind of ease yourself in the performance and it naturally unfolds. Have you ever had one of these wonderful, nice, easy, effective performances and said to yourself, golly, if I can do that so easily, let me push a little harder and see if I can get some more stuff out? What happened? You were working against yourself. There is no such thing as 100% or 110% effort. You're just working against yourselves with the natural rhythms of your performances. Myth number 3 is this notion, correlated to the previous one, that every one of your efforts must be your A game or a peak performance. When you're forcing perfection, forcing excellence, you're working against yourselves. As we talk about in a couple videos from now about the principles of human performance, there are A, B, C games, but trying to force an A game, turn it in and on immediately doesn't work. Especially this notion, a literal term too, of peak performance. When you're always trying to give a peak performance, you're paradoxically taking you away from yourself of the things that will allow a peak performance to emerge. Forcing does not work. Here's something that you may have heard that people say, oh, I have to be so well prepared for a performance of some kind. All I have to do is just react to it. No, there is a huge neurological and psychological difference between reacting and what I call responding. You want to be so well prepared that you can respond to something. For example, if you're a baseball or softball player and there's a runner on first base and you're playing second base and a ball is hit to you, you have mentally rehearsed beforehand where are you going to do what the ball, who are you going to throw it to. When that happens, you're responding in a more effective and efficient manner. Reacting implies that you're not prepared and you're literally or figuratively on your heels waiting for something to happen. That takes much longer time and it is less effective. Instead of using the word react, use the word respond. This is much more than a semantic game. Responding connotes a whole level of anticipation and preparation, where reacting doesn't. A lot of sports reporters, even those who are experienced, ask athletes and performing artists stupid questions, which just highlights their ignorance about the psychology of human performance. One of the questions I hear reporters ask performing artists or athletes is this: what are your expectations for this upcoming performance? As you will find out, expectations is a cancer to performance. We have goals and plans, maybe based on our purpose, maybe based on our dreams. But when we're in an expectation mentality, we try to push too hard to gain perfection, a performance, peak experiences. Now, there's a huge difference from expecting to what you'll be able to do with what you have in the situations. Part of this is getting out of this expectation mentality. So whenever you hear this notion, what are your expectations? Understand the person doesn't know what they're talking about. The next one is, especially in the midst of adversity or scrambling, there is this temptation, or people urge you to become more intense, to become more mentally tough, or to try harder. Paradoxically, again, these are the things you were probably doing to take you off course in the first place. We're too intense. We're trying to be too mean or mentally tough, or trying too hard. And trying harder, pushing harder, trying to become more mentally intense and tough just takes you farther away from your optimal performance levels. So in the midst of adversity, avoid that temptation of becoming more intense, more mentally tough, or trying too hard. You will discover how throughout this series. Finally, whenever you hear a person use this phrase, always put together, of focus and concentration, run away from those people. They have absolutely no idea what they mean between focus and concentration. What you will find out later on in this 100 level series is that focusing is one of the 3 dynamic processes of concentration. They are not equivalent, but they are. A lot of times I would ask somebody, knowing the answer I would receive, hey, what's the difference between focus and concentration? And they don't respond. They say, I don't know. It's one of these convenient catch-all phrases that sends us farther away from becoming in touch with ourselves so our best performances can emerge. Whenever you hear people use these 7 myths, muscle memory, 100 or 110% effort, every effort has to be an A game or a peak performance, reacting versus learning how to respond, having expectations, becoming more intense or mentally tough or trying harder during tough times, and focus and concentration. Understand that those people have no idea what they're talking about human performance. Hence, you being aware of these misunderstandings or myths is the first step for you learning how to tune better into yourselves. After writing 5 books on human performance, 450 popular magazine articles in fitness magazines, bodybuilding magazines, golf magazines about human performance, and over 90 radio scripts that I did for nationally syndicated radio shows that they interviewed me on. I stopped writing in about 2006, thinking I've covered most about what I've ever done. In about 2015, I stopped working with athletes. Occasionally I'd give a speech now to a team or an ensemble, but that's it. So I have no ulterior motives. What all of this did is that I am a lot more free now. I'm less the expert, the research, the help provider. And I've become almost full circle, becoming a student of the game again. I'm loving observing other people perform well, talking about their performances. We enhance each other. And I came up with almost a little poem of what I call I Marvel. I marvel at what different performing artists or business people or students or athletes do in their performances. Let me read this to you. I marvel at peak performances, especially those which seem to come out of nowhere. There is magic with the peak performance. I marvel at how there are spiritual and even mystical dimensions of performance. You become more connected with your teammates, your business partners, colleagues, and also connected with something else. I marvel at the rhythm and the seemingly effortlessness that some performers do. They make it look extraordinarily connected and easy. I marvel at a silly thing. At 10 yards away, one instinctively knows which foot will plant rounding a base or even leaping up on a curb. You don't program that to yourself. You almost intuitively know. I marvel at the subtle nuances and critical moments in performances. You'll learn much more about this as we go along. There are different ebbs and flows to especially longer performances. I marvel at how the underdog persists and endures. I marvel at the ability for some performers to elevate their performances, to kick it into another gear. Roger Federer at his prime, the tennis player, was one of those who can seem to just turn it on to a higher level. I marvel at having both clarity and grace under pressure. The best performers under sustained pressure exhibit almost an ease, an ultra calmness, and even a grace in what they're doing. I marvel at how one courageously overcomes fears, a slump, and their inner demons that sometimes block them. What courage that takes. I marvel at deep and sustained concentration. I marvel at how one's personal purpose and resiliency can help us endure. We've all seen the power of resiliency during the COVID years of the last couple of years. I marvel at this phrase, originally said by Napoleon Hill, that whatever can be conceived and believed can be achieved. Whatever can be conceived and believed can be achieved. And I still marvel at the purity of performing, when the person is just purely doing, purely in the moment. It's not only emphasizing things, but letting other things go. So as much as I'm talking to you about a system and a science of human performance, there is an art to it as well. A part of this art is understanding what things to avoid, to prevent, to eliminate, so that you're freed up to know what to explore. And starting with the next session, I will share with you the 7 existing principles of human performance. Thank you for listening. Thank you for attending. I will see you next time.